Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, Russia. Money flooding out of the country, sanctions eating into the economy, billions spent defending the currency. Just how deep do Russia's problems run right now? Also this week, Japan and the next phase of Abenomics. But does the once mighty land of the rising sun have enough economic strength to deal with another tax hike? And as Twitter takes on the US government over access to your data, we talk to a much smaller social network that claims to put privacy at the heart of the game. You know, when Western powers imposed their sanctions on Russia, the idea was to target Vladimir Putin's circle of influence, hit the oil and banking industry, force a pullback on Ukraine, and avoid damage to the larger economy. But strange things happened. Russian consumers are feeling the pinch. The currency's in a mess, but also unemployment is at a record low. So this week we ask, what's going on? The sanctions came in March, and since then, $75 billion worth of Russian assets have left the country, which is more than the whole of last year. And the Deputy Economy Minister has been quoted as saying it could go as high as $120 billion. The currency, the ruble, has slumped by almost a fifth since the start of the year, raising concerns Russia may respond with capital controls. Remember, plunging currency means imports become more expensive. And Russia's currency reserves, well, they've shrunk more than $30 billion to $465 billion, and it's had to defend the currency and pay more for those imports. Now, that isn't much, to be fair, for a $2 trillion economy, which is expected to dodge a second recession in 5 years. And consider this, as we said earlier, a tight labour market does mean unemployment is at that record low of 4.8%. It's this paradox we'll discuss in a moment, but first, two reports. In a moment, NIDHI from Moscow's former satellite Tajikistan. She tells us how Western sanctions have actually opened up new markets for the country's farmers. But first, RORY CHALLANDS in Moscow as the banks turn to the government to raise money they would have sourced from international markets.
For an easy gauge of how Russia's economy is doing right now, all you need do is watch the tumbling ruble. Each new day seems to bring a record low. On Monday, it briefly hit 40 rubles to the dollar. That's despite intervention from Russia's central bank to support the currency. Caught in the storm are hundreds of Russian banks. International sanctions have effectively cut them off from Western credit, and they're fast running out of money.
As Orwell said, all animals are equal, but some of them are more equal than others. In 1 to 2 years, only the biggest banks will be left in Russia, and many will have government capital in them. The small banks will have to leave the market.
So it seems a significant cull is coming, but bailing out Russia's banking giants like Sberbank here could cost the government dear. Their external debt amounts to some $200 billion, half the central bank's reserves of $400 billion, and helping Russia's indebted companies could cost even more. At an investment forum in Moscow last week, it was possible to detect tensions normally kept out of view. Despite already being the recipient of state financial help, Sberbank's chief, German Gref, blamed government inefficiencies for stunting Russia's business potential.
One cannot motivate people like in the Soviet Union, like in a labor camp. This motivation is short-lived and it doesn't work. People cannot come up with creative products under conditions where they don't understand the current economic policy and the business climate.
For as long as Russia could rely on cheap foreign credit and buoyant energy prices, much-needed structural reforms could be delayed. But now the crisis in Ukraine has shut Russia off from Western capital, and to add insult to injury, oil prices have started falling too.
Erkin Nazarov has been growing grapes here for nearly 20 years. His produce is some of the best in the region. Business has always been good, but Russia's embargo on fruits and vegetables from the European Union means this season Nazarov's earnings are even sweeter.
I've already sent 20 tons of grapes to Russia this season. Thanks be to God. And next year I hope more clients will come to me and that I can send more of my produce there.
From this small farm in Tajikistan straight to one of the region's biggest markets, There may be better times ahead for many people who live off the land here, but not all Tajiks are benefiting from Russia's growing trade challenges with the West. And this trouble is very personal for Bibi Zarifa Solyeva. Her husband works as a laborer on a construction site in Russia. Up until 2 months ago, he sent home $150 every month.
The only money I have is the money my husband sends me. Now I have to choose between paying my bills and buying food for my family.
Despite the slowdown in Russia, Akhmat Dusmarodov is adamant about going back. But before he books his next flight, Dusmarodov needs to check that he's cleared to travel by the Russian authorities.
I'm used to how things work in Russia. I can also earn more money there than at home. There is still work available.
Approximately 1 million Tajiks work in Russia. The money they send back is a lifeline for this small, impoverished Central Asian nation. But Moscow's growing trade impasse with the West may speed up changes to this old migration process.
Over the past 2 years, the Russian government has put in place new migration regulations that limit the number of Tajik workers allowed to go there. So now we are working on ways to provide more work for our people at home.
This means that farmers like Nazarov could soon be Tajikistan's most valuable new employers. And as Russia looks for new places to buy its fruits and vegetables, Nazarov's quaint vineyard may help keep Tajikistan's economy on track.
Well, let's get into the nitty-gritty of Russian economics now, and to do that, we welcome back to Counting the Costs Cornelia Meyer, global economist and expert on energy issues. Cornelia, thanks for joining us. Let's start broad brush, shall we? If I talk about sanctions and Russia, what does that bring to mind? How successful have they been? Who were they really targeting? Give us your thoughts.
Well, they have not been as successful as they probably should have been, but they have inflicted some pain. You have seen some of the Western companies, some of the Western oil companies who have had to stop working on offshore projects. You've certainly seen BP hit with its joint venture with Rosneft. You have seen the EU hit with not being able to import, to export their produce to Russia. But all in all, Russia's had capital flight. It is not in a wonderful economic shape, but they have $450 million of currency reserves and the reserve fund to balance the budget of $90 billion. So in other words, they have a little bit of leeway to withstand some more of this.
Okay, then, so I'm wondering then if this is the point where we have to almost split out the economies, you know, the oil economy and then the quote-unquote real economy on the other side, because you've got something like employment which is still really low in Russia. And you wonder if the sanctions will actually start to get into that something and you know, bite further into jobs and those, as I say, real economy issues.
I think they will get into real economy issues, but mind you, unemployment is really low. But why is unemployment low? Unemployment is low because for two reasons. One, you have a very fast aging population, so you just have not enough young people who are working. That's one thing. And secondly, you have very low productivity, so you need all these few people that you have. The second they have productivity gains, it will look different on the unemployment front.
But what they don't have in Russia right now is a strong currency, and it's interesting that it was only maybe 6 or 7 years ago that Vladimir Putin was starting to tout the ruble as an international currency. Now, has that gone completely, or do you think there could be some sort of resurgence with the ruble?
Well, you would absolutely need for the sanctions to cede. And that's where Russia has a problem, because Russia is so dependent on the oil economy. You know, 70% of exports are oil and gas. 50% of the budget is from revenues from oil and gas. So Russia has not done well in terms of diversifying away from raw materials. So as long as the oil price is low, that's bad for the dollar. Then you have sanctions. You had something to the tune of $120 billion billion of capital flight this year alone. The ruble has been ever sliding. They have only in the last week they have had to support the ruble with about between 1.4 and $3 billion of buying of rubles. So in many ways, if the sanctions are not going, and if the oil price is not going up, or alternatively, if they don't do structural reforms, the ruble will be in bad shape.
Tell me, Cornelia, where you think Russia could diversify its economy, because you've made the point that it hasn't. And, you know, I think of Russia as big country, big population, should have some big opportunities, but as you point out, reliant on oil and gas. Is there somewhere to diversify?
There would be a lot of opportunities to diversify. Look, Russia has a good manufacturing sector. Don't forget, the former Soviet Union had a very good defense sector. They were very strong in research and development. They have exported, after the breakup of the Soviet Union, a lot of the really good scientists went to the US and to Israel, so they've exported those. But with the right tie-ups, let's say with a Boeing, with Western companies that have good technology, they could be great in aircraft manufacturing. Let us not forget the Antonov, the biggest plane on earth, used for transporting really, really huge items. That's a Russian-made plane. So they have great automotive sector as another sector, but the sanctions need to go. And another thing that there needs to be is investors need to feel that they have that they are not threatened by change in law. They need to feel safe with the legal framework.
But until such time as Russia does diversify, Cornelia, it will rely on oil. And the thing we haven't really discussed with regards to oil so far is the price of oil. It's been on the slide. It's not something you can really ignore at the moment. How much of an effect will that have on Russia's budget, especially in this sanction era?
Oh, it has a huge effect, because if you look at it, as I said, 50% of the budget come from oil and gas. So right now they are fine because they have this $90 billion of a reserve fund to support the budget. But if the oil price stays as it is, they will have run through that in about 2.5 years. So really, the oil price needs to go up, and you know it's never ever too late to do structural reforms. They will always be hard. But, you know, if I was the Russian leadership, that's what I would start to work on.
Well, as you mentioned, the Russian leadership, let's talk about that and the L word here, legacy. When we talk about Vladimir Putin, who's been such a huge player and such a figure of Russian politics for so long. Economically, what do you think, or where do you think his legacy is headed? Put it that way.
Well, I think his legacy is, the first legacy is to have given Russia back a little bit of pride. You had a lot of oligarchs owning a lot of the natural resource assets, and he's sort of by some let's put it unconventional means gotten back some government ownership over that. So he has done that. So he is, in his view, he will say he has given the country back some pride. But if he's not engaging on structural reforms, if he's not getting to an amicable solution, so can control the situation in the eastern Ukraine, so we can stop the sanction, his legacy in terms of the economy will not be a good one.
Cornelia Meyer, it's been a pleasure to talk to you again. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
And still ahead on Counting the Cost, the social network on a different path. We speak to the founder of Path about online privacy in the social media world. We turn to Japan now, though, where Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is thinking about another increase in tax. It does seem an obvious way to raise money and to bring down debt, but the question is Japan in good enough shape to actually handle that? Wayne Hay reports from Tokyo.
Japan's economic machine used to be the envy of the world, but the glory days are a distant memory, and the messages emanating from the government's money men aren't encouraging.
The economic performance from the third quarter is not expected to be high.
The government is trying desperately to breathe life back into the economy. At the same time, it has a problem in the form of massive national debt, which it's trying to bring under control with tax increases. The consumption tax was increased from 5 to 8% in April. It's hit everyone, from factories who are paying more for raw materials to the end consumer who's paying more at the shop. Now everyone is looking to the Prime Minister, Shinzo Abe, to see whether he'll put it up again. He says he'll decide by the end of the year whether to increase it to 10% in October 2015, as part of his fiscal plans dubbed Abenomics.
That is the most important.
But one of the Prime Minister's key men says the economy isn't strong enough to handle it.
In my personal opinion, I recommend that we should postpone the consumption tax hike for the next round of consumption tax hike by 18 months, 1.5 years.
The once proud Made in Japan label has also taken a battering. NISSIN makes parts for electronics and car manufacturers and the machines to make those parts. They're increasingly looking to take their business offshore to places like Thailand, the Philippines and China, where labour is cheaper and more readily available. Even the recent weakening of the yen, which is helping exporters, may not be enough to bring manufacturers back home.
No matter how weak the yen gets, our clients who went overseas will not come back here. Even if the labor cost rises in China, for example, they would look into relocating elsewhere, like Bangladesh, rather than coming back to Japan.
Japan needs to get people back into the shops and spending again. The problem is they're paying more than they used to, and figures show real wages are falling. And there's one more issue heaping increasing pressure on the government. Its population is aging and shrinking fast, so every day there are less people spending money.
Finally this week, social media and privacy. Now, this is not anything new. The Edward Snowden affair kind of blew it all out in the open last year. But there are continuing concerns about what happens to our online content and who's accessing it. Here's the latest one. In essence, Twitter is suing the US government. The backstory is that some tech companies signed up to a deal where they would disclose the amount of data requests they get from spy agencies, but only in broad numbers. Say, we got between 0 and 999 requests in the last month or whenever. That doesn't tell users a whole lot about how much they're being watched. Twitter wasn't part of that deal because it wants to be able to disclose all the requests it gets so people have the full picture. In a statement, it talks about the restrictions being a violation of the First Amendment. Now, smaller players in the social media game weren't really part of this, but some say that privacy is really paramount to the whole experience. You may very well never have heard of the social network Path because it's doing things in a different, smaller and, it claims, much more private way. Now, while Facebook has 829 million daily active users, Path only had 1.5 million at the start of the year. But comparative growth in 2014 has been good. It's now up to 5 million daily active users from a total base of around 25 million global users. So it's very much a smaller player, but then compared to Facebook, who isn't small. Well, joining us via Skype from San Francisco is Dave Morin. He's a former manager at Facebook, but now the co-founder and CEO of Path. Dave, welcome to Counting the Cost. Privacy seems central to what Path is about. What do you make of the storm in the last year or so about online privacy? Is it something you worry about?
Well, when we founded Path in 2010, it was certainly before a lot of the more recent revelations and conversations about privacy had started. And in that moment in time, we really felt that there was a countercultural opportunity almost where, the internet was becoming more and more open. People were connecting to more and more people. It was all about how many friends can you have. We really felt that there was an opportunity to create a more private system and a system that was meticulously crafted to guard your privacy and to give you control and tools and, really was architected with privacy in the very core of its DNA. And so, whether it's our social networking system and, we limit the number of friends that you can have to 500, or our messaging system where we only store your messages for 24 hours and then we delete them off of our servers. We try to do things in every aspect of all of our products that really respect your privacy and give you, the ultimately, ability to feel safe and to be yourself.
So to that end, do you see yourself as competition for the likes of Facebook and Twitter, or do you class yourself as an alternative?
We see ourselves very much as a genuine alternative, and we think that there's value in alternatives. I mean, I guess in seeing yourself as an alternative, that certainly plays out in a competitive way. However, I think just like in the early days of the personal computer revolution, you had companies like Microsoft and companies like Apple providing different solutions to the world of computing. I think we're very much in the era of social DOS, where social networking is only just begun, and we're still using a command line for the most part to communicate. And so I think that there's still an extraordinary amount of opportunity, and so we just want to be the high quality alternative that's focused on quality and your privacy over all else.
So you are a social network, but a more simplified social network, and importantly, I think we need to explain to viewers, only available on mobile. Why did you set it up, given the competition and given the size of your competition?
Well, we set it up because we really thought that there was indeed value in alternatives. We wanted to create a more simplified experience, a higher quality experience, and importantly, an experience that respected your privacy and fundamentally was an ad-free experience where you were not a product.
Yeah, but how do you do that? Because one of the things we always have to think about, and we've used Facebook as an example here, so many people use Facebook on a mobile platform, but you can't tap into advertising revenue on mobile platforms. And you are doing, as I said, Path completely on mobile devices. So how do you make it work for you then?
Well, one of the most amazing things that's happening because of mobile is that it's possible to create revenue and create opportunities for users to buy goods and services directly, because it's as easy to buy on mobile as it is to have one click of your finger. And so I think that that's really changed the way that commerce is happening on mobile. And so our orientation from day one has been to provide a free service, but then also a premium subscription, and then a series of virtual goods. As well as more recently, we've just added a new premium service for text messaging businesses. All of this is really oriented in much more of a commerce direction than it is in an advertising direction.
And how has it taken off? Let me tell you, about 3 years ago, Kevin Rose, the founder of dig.com, was on this show, and he said Path was one to watch back then. Has growth actually matched your expectations?
Well, it's exceeded our expectations in certain markets. In other markets, I would say it we perhaps haven't met our expectations. We're seeing fantastic growth in Asia right now, in particular in Southeast Asia, which is one of the fastest growing mobile markets in the world. And we're now also seeing fantastic growth in the Middle East broadly, but in particular Saudi Arabia and the Arabian Peninsula in general. We're seeing quite a lot of growth, and we've been surprised by that, but delighted. And we're also doing quite well in America, but I think we certainly still have work to do there, and that's something we work on every day.
Okay, can I go back to the point about Saudi Arabia? Because we would usually think of Saudi Arabia as a more closed society, limitations on online activity there. So why do you think you're actually seeing such growth there?
Well, we're seeing, I think at the top line, there's quite a lot of mobile growth there. We do prioritize, like I said, privacy. I think that the Saudi Arabian community also has a respect for quality as well. And so I think that we're seeing, those values resonate really strongly in that market. And we're also seeing some unique use cases. Over the years, Path has evolved to not just be a social networking system, but we also now have a second app that's focused around messaging. And, in both cases, we're seeing heavy messaging usage, but we're also seeing that, Saudi Arabian users love our photo sharing and music sharing capabilities, and our unique types of feedback as well. So, it's really just sort of captured the people's attention in that market, and we're delighted by that.
Dave, let's just go back to the commerce side of things, because I have seen this Path Talk Places thing that you've talked about, directly connecting with businesses. How does that work? If I was, say, a business, a restaurant, and I wanted to get on board, what's in it for me?
The business doesn't have to sign up. However, if the business wants to, we will connect them into our workflow, and they can answer the questions via, however they like answering questions, whether it's email or SMS. But we find that businesses actually really love it because we interface with them in the way that they're used to communicating with customers anyway, which in a lot of cases is over the phone.
Dave Morin from Path, a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining us. And that's our show for this week, but there's more for you online at aljazeera.com/programs. The Counting the Cost page is there with individual reports, links and entire episodes for you to catch up on. Seeing as we've been talking about social media, there is the social media feed down the right-hand side, which you can join in by tweeting either me, at Kamal AJE, or our business editor at Abid Oliver Ali, and do use the hashtag Counting the Cost to join that social media feed, or just drop us an email. countingthecost@aljazeera.net is the address. But that's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Kamal Santamaria from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.